Sometimes the people you love the most are the people you should trust the least. Cassie Jo Sodart was house sitting for her aunt, and she invited her boyfriend and 2 of his friends over to spend the evening together. Her boyfriend's 2 friends had left pretty early in the evening, but they didn't. At some point while they were all hanging out, the 2 boys snuck into the basement and unlocked one of the basement doors. When they actually left, they snuck into the basement and shut the power off to startle Cassie and lure her down into the basement. That didn't work, so the 2 boys sat in the basement and waited for her boyfriend to leave. When he did leave, the 2 boys proceeded to put on masks, come upstairs, and stab her. If that isn't bad enough, footage was found after the murder that they were planning to commit the murder ahead of time. There was also footage found from after they killed her. So think about the people you love the most. Do you trust them?
Imagine getting arrested for having a child with a dead body. Jennifer Burrows is a 26-year-old who was working at a morgue when she was arrested after a DNA test proved her child's father was a dead body she was supposed to autopsy. But it actually gets worse from here, because while Jennifer was working as an assistant pathologist at the morgue, she had relations with more than 60 bodies, belonging to men aged 17 to 71 years old. She did this for 2 years until it led to the birth of her son. Her son's father was a 57-year-old veterinarian from Texas, who passed away in a car accident in 2017. Jennifer was charged with 158 counts of indecent treatment of a corpse. Many psychologists and experts have debated why someone would do this. The reasons range from curiosity to severe mental illness. Some even believe Jennifer was suffering from psychosis. Alright, after all that, I don't really know how to end this video, so stay safe out there and follow for more.
She was talking to him on the phone when she heard a sinister voice, and then the phone went silent. It was January 1991. Christopher Case met an inexplicable end. Found lifeless in his bathtub, the grim scene stirred a local legend. Then Sammy, his childhood friend, was left with the chilling details from the final conversation. Christopher recounted paralyzing fear as a whisper from beneath his bed woke him one night. A shadowy figure emerged, its icy grip choking him into unconsciousness. And then at dawn he woke, gasping, discovering bruises on his throat and incisions on his fingertips, proof of his midnight ordeal. As he shared his dread of the impending night with Sammy, their call took a sinister turn. The whispers returned, blurring reality with the nightmare. Abruptly, their connection severed, replaced by a silence that echoed with a sinister intent. And that's when she told the cops.
This is considered one of the most shocking cases in Polish history. On January 6, 1999, a sailor in Poland noticed something strange floating on the river. It was long and pale and it smelled very bad. And as he leaned in closer to get a better look, he saw an ear attached to it. Now, what I'm about to say next is very disturbing, so be warned. After the sailor found this substance, DNA testing then indicated it was the skin of a missing woman named Katarzyna Zawada. And whoever did this to her turned her skin into a suit and was likely wearing it. So at this point, only her skin was found. Until January 14th, when pieces of her clothing and one leg was found also in the river. 17 years later, 52-year-old Robert J. was arrested for this. He previously worked in a dissection lab, meaning he was skilled in preparing animal skin. And he allegedly also knew the victim. As of October 2022, 23 years since the victim was found, Robert J. is still awaiting trial. As he remains in custody, investigators are allegedly gathering more evidence to solve the case. Follow for more.
He wakes up next to his girlfriend looking like this, and what happens next will give you nightmares. Tom jolted awake to his girlfriend's voice echoing through the room. Eyes wide, she stared at him with an unsettling emptiness, her voice unnaturally deep. He questioned if she was awake, but her silent gaze darted around the room. Suddenly her eyes rolled back, revealing only the whites. Fear gripped him, but he needed answers. "Are you okay?" he managed to ask, desperate for any sign of recognition. No response. Her eyes locked onto his, but her breathing remained steady, a telltale sign of sleep. Yet her voice contradicted that. In a chilling tone, she commanded him to return to bed, threatening him with an unimaginable violence. But as he tried to escape, she unleashed a blood-curdling scream, sending shivers down his spine. He doused her with water, causing her eyes to close and her movement to return to normal.
Okay, actually though, that's a crazy story. Kayla Unbian was just 9 years old in 2017 when she was abducted in Chicago. Her father had just won custody of her, and when he went to go pick her up from a camping trip that her and her mother was on, she was gone. Kayla's mom took her and they split, and he was pretty sure that he was never going to see her again. But then Netflix has this show called Unsolved Mysteries, and they aired an episode about children that were kidnapped by their parents. At the end of the episode, they flashed this image on the screen, and it is only on screen for 4 seconds. But then flash forward to last month, there's a person shopping in a grocery store in North Carolina, and she sees this woman in the store and she's like, that's the woman from the poster. The woman in question is with a 16-year-old girl, so the shopper runs to the front desk and is like, we have to call the cops right now. And they were right. The cops picked them up and they were able to reunite Kayla with her dad 5 years later. This goes to show that even when you're watching something really fast, your brain is still registering it and you can still use that information to potentially help someone. Have you heard about the supernatural presence some hikers have seen? Apparently, multiple hikers who have been in the same extreme survival situations reported seeing the same ghostly presence. It's known as the third man syndrome, and it's when a supernatural presence appears to give comfort and encouragement to someone. I did a whole episode on it on the podcast, but this is one of the stories that really stood out to me. So in 1983, James Sevigny and his friend Richard were hiking in the Canadian Rockies. They were up part of a mountain when all of a sudden James hears this thunderous roar coming from up the mountain. And as he looks up, there's just thousands of tons of snow pummeling straight towards him. James and Richard get hit hard, and when James wakes up, he's in bad shape. His body had been tumbled around like socks in a dryer. He had all these broken bones and internal bleeding. And so he thinks this is it. He just lays down and accepts it. But 20 minutes later, he feels this person come up behind him, and he's under the snow, mind you. And this person says, you can't give up, you have to live. And somehow James crawls out of the snow where he sees 2 cross-country skiers in the distance, and they come over and rescue him. Richard unfortunately didn't make it, but James lived. Some people attribute this to guardian angels, but what do you think? What are some of the craziest things that people have confessed to at the end of their lives? Well, in this series, I'm going to show you some of the wildest stories I found. And I cover all sorts of spooky and true crime stuff on this page, so make sure you follow along. So this story comes from a woman who was helping her mother at the end of her mother's life. The woman actually lived in Europe, but her mom lived in China, so when she got the call that her mother wasn't doing very well, she made the long journey all the way back. And right when she gets there, her mother asks all the doctors and nurses to leave the room. She apparently wanted to be absolutely alone with her daughter. So the daughter's like, what's up, are you okay? And the mom tells her she knows she doesn't have a lot of time left, so there's something she really wants to tell her. Her mother proceeds to tell her that she's not actually her biological mother. And obviously this comes as like a huge shock to the daughter, but it's nothing compared to what came next. The mother proceeds to tell her that when she was younger, she really wanted to have her own kids, but unfortunately she just wasn't able to get pregnant. And not only that, but she didn't have a lot of money, so going through an adoption agency wasn't necessarily an option. So she actually bought the daughter off the black market for adopted children in China. Meaning she didn't know if the daughter's adopted parents gave her up willingly or if someone had taken her to put her on the black market. The mother actually passed away just shortly after that, and we haven't gotten any update from the poster if she got any more information on her biological family.
Mommy told me something a little girl should know. It's all about the devil.
The tribesman ended my life. My name is John Allen Chow, and I only lived for 26 years. I had a passion for camping, hiking, and traveling, and I embarked on missionary trips to various countries. Although I visited the Andaman Islands, I never had the opportunity to set foot on North Sentinel Island. Outsiders are strictly prohibited from approaching this island due to the risks involved. The tribesmen have no immunity to common illnesses, such as the flu and measles, so any contact could be dangerous for them. They are extremely hostile and do not allow anyone to enter their territory. I believed that this island was the last stronghold of Satan on earth, and I wanted to convert its inhabitants to Christianity. To prepare for this mission, I underwent vaccinations, quarantine, and received medical and linguistic training. I hired fishermen to take me as close to the island as possible. They dropped me off 500 to 700 meters from the shore and warned me not to go any further. However, I disregarded their advice and paddled the rest of the way. On November 15th, during my first attempt, I carried a waterproof Bible and tried to offer gifts. Unfortunately, I faced hostile responses and had to retreat. During my second attempt, I sang worship songs to them and attempted to communicate in their language. When I approached with fish and gifts, a boy shot a metal-headed arrow that pierced the Bible I was holding in front of my chest. On November 17th, my third and final attempt, I entrusted my diary to the fishermen and instructed them to leave. Later, the fishermen witnessed the islanders dragging my lifeless body, and the following day, they found my body washed ashore. The fishermen handed my diary to my family before being arrested. Despite this tragedy, my family has chosen to forgive the tribesmen after reading my diary, where I expressed that the eternal lives of this tribe were within reach. I urged them not to harbor anger if I were to be killed and requested that my body not be retrieved. However, my father holds the missionaries accountable for my unwavering devotion to Christianity, which ultimately led to my demise. The Indian authorities have been unable to recover my body due to the vigilant nature of the tribe. They are also concerned about the well-being of the tribe, as it remains uncertain how they will react if approached. Though I aim to achieve success in my mission, it seems that fate was not on my side.
Mum, can you just pass my drink that's on the table, please? Thanks.
I asked to be tortured until my death. My name is Sharon, and this is my story. I was born on September 20th, 1961, in the United States. I grew up with my three sisters in what was considered a normal family. In 1991, I married a construction worker named Victor and moved in with him. In 1995, I started doing online advertising from home to make money. I also began engaging in more intimate activities under the name Nancy Carlson. I sold my underwear and created content featuring drugged women engaging in unhealthy acts. I also participated in increasingly explicit chat rooms. In 1996, I met Robert Glass, a computer analyst, in a virtual setting. He was married with 3 children and spent a lot of time on controversial websites at the time, sending raw, violent, and disturbing messages on an adult chat room using pseudonyms. His wife discovered his online activities and decided to leave him. One day, I revealed to Robert my desire to be tortured to death. We exchanged over 900 pages of emails discussing this. I also asked other men to overfeed me until I weighed over 200 kilograms. Robert agreed and explained how he planned to mistreat me, end my life, and fulfill my darkest desires. On October 13, 1996, I informed my husband that I was going to Georgia to meet some acquaintances. I left a note stating that I wouldn't be returning home and that there was no need to worry if my body was never found because I would be at peace. Robert picked me up in his van and took me to his mobile home. At the same time, my husband found my note and informed the police. 3 days later, I died as a result of strangulation by Robert and the acts of servitude I had requested. The police discovered the exchanged emails between Robert and me and searched the caravan. They found disturbing adult exploitation materials and discovered parts of my body buried a few days later. My acquaintances were astonished because I appeared normal to them. Robert argued that my death was accidental, and the autopsy confirmed strangulation during an act. However, the police disagreed due to my emails and the note I had left. Robert was charged with first-degree murder and also faced charges related to the possession of child exploitation material. However, he pleaded guilty to charges of involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 36 to 53 months in a correctional facility. He was found dead from a heart attack in 2002, a month before his federal sentence was set to begin. This story raised numerous questions among people about consensual murders and whether a person could consent to their own murder. It notably inspired the film, Downloading Nancy.
It's 1984 in a small town in Brazil called Garahum. Jorge Negromonte and his wife Isabel want nothing more but to have a child and start a family, but they can't. A few years pass by, and after countless attempts at having a child and not succeeding, Jorge decides to take matters into his own hands. He then meets a young girl, Bruna Oliveira, who he describes as a captivatingly beautiful brunette. However, she's just a teenager. Jorge's 34 and she is 16. It's almost more conceivable that she would be the daughter that he never had, but regardless, she becomes Jorge's mistress. Bruna eventually moves in with the couple, starts living in their home, and Isabel seemingly doesn't mind. And as Bruna's been living with them for some time, she begins to realize that Jorge is a completely different guy when he's not taking his medication. She begins telling him about her interest in Satanism, and eventually reveals to him that she herself is a witch. Together they start learning about black magic, Wicca, and the occult, and together form their own secret sect or branch of Satanism. Meanwhile, Jorge still has a deep desire to have children and begins growing envious of his neighbors, whom he thinks in his mind do not deserve kids because they'll grow up to be nothing more than low-life criminals who serve no purpose other than polluting the world. This deep-rooted jealousy, combined with their interest in black magic, causes Jorge, Isabel, and Bruna to conjure up a plan for revenge. They find it imperative, almost necessary, that they kill the women of the world that God would deem as worthless trash. The only problem, however, is that this sin violates the 7th commandment, thou shalt not kill. They consider this briefly, but eventually come to the conclusion the only way God will forgive me for this is if I purify myself. And how do they purify themselves? Eating the bodies. Maybe not the solution that I would have went with, but in 2011, Bruna and Isabel go out into town to look for female victims. While on their hunt, they stumble across a 17-year-old teenage mom named Jessica. She's just had a newborn baby, but she's broke, desperate, and hungry. Isabel and Bruna start having a conversation with her, and they seem quite trustworthy. The three then head toward the Negromonte home, where the teen mom starts doing odd jobs around the house for about 3 months until January 2012. It's just like any other day. Jessica arrives at the trio's home to do some chores around the house, and she's holding her baby in her arms, having a conversation with Bruna, and all of a sudden Jorge comes up from behind her. He takes a giant machete and stabs Jessica in the neck. She then collapses, holding her child in her arms, and dies before she hits the ground. The love triangle then proceeds to dismember Jessica's body while her child is watching and consume bits and pieces of her flesh. A month later, 21-year-old Gazelle de Silva is lured to the home and experiences a similar fate. Bruna and Isabel invite her over to talk about their devotion to God, but things don't exactly work out that way. The third and final killing occurs 30 days later when the girls lure Alexandra de Silva to the household, claiming they need a babysitter to watch over their child. In reality, this is the child of Jessica, the teen mom, but regardless, 20-year-old Alexandra is interested in the position, so she travels to the family home, where her life is taken in a very similar fashion. They proceed to take all of her possessions, including her credit cards, and that's when Bruna makes a crucial mistake. She uses the credit card at a nearby store, yes, the credit card of a missing woman. Police track her down, find her, and take her into questioning. When she's arrested, not only does she admit to killing the babysitter they tried to hire, Alexandra, but also Gazelle, the woman they found off the street, and the first victim, Jessica. She then goes on to explain that it's very unlikely the officers will be able to find these bodies because, well, they had been cooking them into meat pies and selling them around the neighborhood for the community to enjoy. Police immediately call in a raid to the home of Jorge Negromonte and find him, a bag of bones, and a 50-page manifesto entitled Revelations of a Schizophrenic. And when the story gets out, not only are people in the local community feeling disgusted about the horrors that went on in the Negromonte home, but also they're feeling physically ill because those meat pies were extremely popular and sold all over town. Jorge is then dubbed the real-life Sweeney Todd. 2 years later, in 2014, the trial begins, and while people find the heinous details of the case to be quite disturbing, they are left feeling even more uncomfortable by the behavior of the defendants. Jorge and Bruna are often seen smiling in court, growing more and more affectionate with one another with each gruesome detail. They seem happy, almost euphoric, when the court starts talking about the trio turning people into pies, but this attitude quickly changes when the verdict is released. Jorge Negromonte is convicted on 2 counts of murder, concealment, and vilification of a corpse and is given 71 years in prison. Isabel is given a slightly less severe sentence